Okay, so next part, this is the microphone check. So we are going to come over here to our vocal channel, and we'll go up here to the gain, which is currently turned all the way off right now. And so you got to remember that you try to give yourself a little more headroom than what you think you're going to need, because when doing your vocal checks, you're just going to kind of be doing your check 1, 2, you know, the basic thing. And remember, singers, when they perform on stage, they'll have that performance energy, and they're usually going to sing a lot louder. So if you're not hitting 0 down here on your mic check, you know, don't worry completely about that, because once your singer starts singing, you're probably going to be hitting any levels, and you'll probably have to turn them down. So, but it is good to bring your gain up a little higher than what you're going to need, because then you can test that feedback point, and then you can always ring out those frequencies on your 31 band, and then you can bring that gain slightly back, and then it gives you more room to where you're going to have less potential for feedback because you checked it at a higher level, and then you can bring it down. And obviously the more volume your singer can give you, then the less you have to turn up your gain here, which means the less potential for feedback because you're not amplifying that voltage. So the louder your singer can be, the better when it comes to microphones, as long as they're not cupping the mic and distorting it, which is just bad, and you should smack them for doing that, because you can, especially with wireless, you can distort the actual input on the wireless mic receivers pretty easily by cupping them and yelling into them like that. So we'll start here, bring our gain up, check, check, and you see as I'm talking, check, 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 it's almost hitting that 0, check, 1, 2, check, check, it's hitting about -4 to -2, which is pretty good for just talking, check, check, 1, 2, because as I said, remember, your vocalist is going to have a lot more power and energy behind them once they actually start singing, and so you'll end up bringing that gain down. Check, 2, check, 1, 2. So that's a good level to start with. And then so we will bring up that channel. So we will unmute it, and I'll bring it up on the fader. And there you go. You start to hear it through the PA system. Check, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. Okay, so now that we know it's coming through and it's working, I'm going to now place the mic up on the stage where it would be where the performers would sit. So my little mock stage here, I'm going to set it behind the PA, because right now I have the mic in front of the PA, and checking it in front of the PA system is obviously going to have more potential for feedback because you're in front of the horns and speakers. So unless the singer is going to come out and run around in front of that, it's better to check it behind it, because you can get a little more volume and a little more gain before feedback, obviously, when the mic is not in the direct path of the speaker itself. So we're going to move it back there to the my little mock stage behind the speakers, as it would be setting on stage, and then we'll show you how to tune out those feedback frequencies. Okay, so this is the tuning part, and I'll start off first by letting you know there is a little better way to start before actually testing your feedback, and that is what they call pinking the room. And in any pro concert environment, you're definitely going to see this done before you actually do any mic checks. And basically, you're tuning that PA to the room. Every room is going to have different acoustics and reflections and all that. The problem is, what most people run into, and this is what I've run into a lot, is if you're setting up in a bar, or maybe there's a lot of restaurants that turn into a bar after 10 o'clock, and you're in there setting up, maybe 8 o'clock, it's the middle of the dinner rush, you don't always have time to do that pink noise test. And basically, just to give you a quick look, so we turn on our signal generator, and it's on pink noise. This is what pink noise sounds like. So that is pink noise. It's it's basically like a static, if you could, describe it. And what it is in that signal, all the frequency spectrum is actually an even level. So across all these, technically coming out of it is level. And so what you would do is you would use this RTA, and you saw when I brought it up how some was higher and there's dips and cuts. That is the, what that microphone is hearing coming out of the speaker. So the speakers are going to have their characteristics, obviously, of what they can accurately put out, and then the room is going to have its reflections. And here it's not actually too bad because I'm in my garage, and it's actually it's all drywalled in, so I don't have a lot of reflections. As you can hear when I'm talking, there's not a whole lot of extra reverb in this room. But when you get into a bigger bar, it's going to have super high ceilings and a wide room, or maybe some of the worst things you can try to do work in, and it's tricky to do, is hotel ballrooms, because they will have like multiple reflections, and you clap and you hear it flutter and echo 5 or 6 times. That is a little trickier to tune out. Hopefully if you're doing a show at a hotel ballroom or something like that, you actually get some time that you can run pink noise and tune your system out that way and get the room what's called as flat as possible, and that's trying to get this graph as flat. Now understand, you're never going to get this perfectly flat as a solid line. That's theoretically impossible. That's the goal that everyone strives for, and especially recording studios try to get their space completely flat, because basically the flatter environment you're mixing in, the more accurate you can mix as to what that's doing. If you have artificial boost in frequencies in your low range, your high range, your mids, then you mix around that, then you're adding something or taking away something that you don't need to because of the room. So you want to try to get the room as flat as possible, and then you're hearing more accurately what you're actually doing with that mix. So especially in studio recordings, that's very important to get a perfectly flat room, and then they obviously spend millions of dollars to do that. But if you're setting up and local bars and pubs and restaurants and things like that, you're not going to get a perfectly flat room, so don't worry too much about it, because you got to remember the client you're mixing for, it's just going to be your local outgoers on a Friday, Saturday night. They're not expecting a Bruce Springsteen's concert or Peter Gabriel or some $1 million recording artist. It's not going to sound like a $1 million recording, obviously. It's a local bar, so don't worry about if you can't get a perfectly flat room. So the main things you want to try to do is cut out the feedback. So I'll show you, this down and dirty, how to quickly do that if you're setting up. So you can imagine right now the band is setting up on stage, and you as the audio guy needs to do some quick room tuning as they're getting their gear ready. And obviously you're going to have some background noise. And if I stop for a second, so you saw that curve there, and basically that's just the room noise. Right now my AC is running and my duct's above me here, so you usually will see this 125, 250, sometimes way down low kind of rumble, and then the fans that you hear from the airflow, and especially in restaurants and bars, they're always going to have either the heat cranking or the AC cranking to control the room, so you have to deal with all that noise. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So we do the feedback, and you'll see once the mic starts to feedback, you'll see a single frequency, or maybe it'll be a harmonic, and it'll be kind of two together, like a 2K and a 4K or something like that. It's jumping in octaves. You'll see that line, and you're going to look for that line to spike up all by itself. So what I'm going to do on this end, what you won't be seeing, is basically I have my vocal sitting up there as as it was on stage, and I have my gain set with that level that I had, and I was reading my meters in there, so I know what it's doing. So now I'm going to be riding my fader up and down, pushing it until I start to slightly hear feedback, and then I'm going to cut that frequency out on my 31 band. And I don't have a tripod, so I'm going to do this one-handed, so I'm going to cut it back on the fader. And usually you can do this with both hands, so you have one hand riding your fader and one hand on your EQ graph. And since you have two sets of controls, you have your channel 1 and channel 2, instead of trying to do both at the same time, you could just kill your right mix and just work on your left side, and then vice versa, and then put them together and then double check it again to make sure they're good. Or you can just try to reach down and do both at the same time here. So just to make it easy, I'm just going to do the one side. So I'm just going to be working on my top half right here. So this is just my left side, and so we'll see what happens. So you saw that spike there. I'll drag that over to where it was, And so you see up here, you see the dB moving, and then you see that little part there, that is 5,000 hertz or 5K. So what we do is we go down here and we make a slight little cut at 5K, and then we ride that level back up a little more. Okay, so there's a higher. There's kind of 8. And 10K together. So we'll come down here, we'll make a small little cut. Remember, you always want to cut small. You don't want to make big drastic cuts because you're in this upper frequency range, which is where feedback is going to happen usually, unless it's a condenser mic. Sometimes they'll feedback way down at, like, 100 hertz, 200 hertz. They're a little tricky to work out feedback with condensers, but dynamics generally usually feedback in the higher range. If you start cutting a lot of this drastically out, you're really going to kill the high end out of your mix. So it's always a battle as to getting enough volume and without feedback, and cutting out feedback frequencies without destroying your mix. Because remember, this is the clarity range. This 4K all the way up is your cymbal brightness and your hi-hat and your sibilance and your voice, which is your S's and stuff like that. Your clarity's up here. So you start making a huge, bunch of cuts up here and cutting out all this stuff really drastically, then your mix is just going to be really muddy and sound like it's underwater. So it's always kind of a push-pull, situation here when tuning out feedback. So we'll go back up there. And that's pretty good right there. So if you can slightly hear on this camera mic, my mic is pointing in that direction, and I have my gain where it was when we checked it, and I am almost at the very max point of this fader. Like, it's not going to go much louder than that, and I can actually start to hear myself coming through the PA when the mic is 10-15 feet in front of me and pointed at the wall over there. I can actually start to hear it. So that's probably about the max range I'm going to get out of this mic before I'm just going to be feeding back so much that I'm going to be killing all my highs. So next I'm going to match that to the right side, and then we're going to play back some music, and then just to make sure that we still have clarity in that music range. Okay, so now you saw those cuts I made there on the EQ. I copied that to the right side, brought it back up and double checked it real quick. I now have the microphone in front of the PA system, and so you saw how it started before where I was getting rings and stuff, and so there we go. Actually out in front of the PA system, I have the mic pretty much at unity. If I had this behind the speakers, I could actually go a little hotter on that fader send and send it up quite a bit more without feeding back. So that's going to be plenty enough volume. Once you start reaching a certain point, like I said, where it's just feeding back all the time, then that's pretty much the max limit is the louder you're going to get without having to degrade the quality of the mix and of the sound, because you're just gouging out everything up here. So if I do a quick little check, 1 2, check 1 2, yeah, check 1 2, 1 2. So you see there, even there's getting a slight bit of ring, but like I said, I'm in front of the speakers right now, and I was hitting 95 dB, just checking it, like that. So you put a powerful singer behind there, and with the rest of your mix and stuff, you're going to be in that 95 dB range. This is a pretty comfortable listening range. Quick thing on dBs, which is kind of a term that's thrown around a lot. Kind of the, again, textbook term for the decibel when occurring to when you're dealing with loudness is called the dBSPL, which is dB sound pressure level. And people throw dBs around like, oh, it's 10 dB louder or whatever. 10 dB is actually a doubling in volume, is how humans hear. It's kind of the general textbook answer as to how loud a doubling in volume is. Actually 10 dB. So you see this kind of fluctuating around here, jumping up and down. If I take the mic away, so ambient room noise, see around 56. So as I'm talking and I get louder, See, now you see that I'm hitting up there almost a 70, so I'm twice as loud as what the room was. So going up 10 dB is twice as loud. So remember, if you're going from 95 dB up to 105 dB, that is a huge jump in loudness, and you're actually twice the volume. Most of your big rock concerts will hit around 110 dB because if you're right up close to the stage, it'll be louder than that, but usually at the front of house position they usually keep it around that, because actually 114 dB SPL is where it starts to damage your hearing. And if anyone works in blue collar jobs and deals with OSHA, you might know that OSHA actually requires any job that is exposed to 85 dB during an 8-hour period constantly, like if you're working in machinery or a factory, is required to wear earplugs. So 85 dB is the requirement for earplugs. And so you see up here as I'm talking now, that's not even that loud. So there we go, there's about 85. So if you're working in this volume all day long, OSHA actually requires you to wear earplugs. So just so you know, a reference point when it comes to dB ratings and stuff like that. So for your local shows and stuff, you don't need to be reaching over 100 dB in a bar, because you're actually, that's pretty cranking loud. So if your PA is sitting, 95 dB with a full band behind it, that's a pretty comfortable listening environment. People can still carry on a decent conversation, and they can still hear you, and you're a nice solid sound behind them. You don't need it rock concert levels of 114 dB to 120 when you're staying right in front of the stage. So you see this, guys, it's always right up in front of the speakers. That's a pretty bad idea, because they're going to lose their hearing real quick. That's where you hear your ringing in your ears and stuff after a loud concert. That is actually damage done to your ears. You're actually losing frequencies when you hear that ring. So be safe with decibels and don't kill the audience. So just a quick little note on that, so you kind of understand better terminology of what the decibel is. So you saw the mic tuning, and then I'm going to double check it with music real quick, and I'm going to show you one last little thing when it comes to the front of house tuning. Okay, so now after we made all those feedback cuts, we want to test the clarity of the system with some music playback. You could do either or first, do music and then do feedback and then do music again, so you could compare to what you had before as to when you made those cuts. Everyone has their own method of the order they do things in, and of course all that's going to be if you have time restrictions on how fast you have to get things up and going at the gig you're doing. So just do whatever time allows, but you definitely want to make sure you do get a good feedback check. And then lastly, we'll test the music, and then also if you do test music first or after you do your feedback check, having a left-right source like that is going to double check to make sure everything is coming in on our left and right. You can cut your left and rights out, or if you just have a master up here and you have a pan control like some boards do, then you can make sure everything is hitting the correct channel. Left is on your left and right's on the right, and just make sure you got everything passed right when you hook it together. So we usually, most engineers will like to test with something that is a very clean, good sounding mix, something that's produced highly well. Like Tom Petty, Eric Clapton, John Mayer. You see a lot of Steely Dan stuff, just because it can test the clarity of the system. There's not a lot of distortion and effects and stuff like there would in rock and metal and stuff like that. And definitely rap music is pointless to test a PA system with unless you're DJing rap music, because it has nothing to it to test. You want something that's got all these different textures of percussion and the cymbals and stuff, and you'll be able to hear the clarity of the system, and if it's anything standing out, or did you make your system too dull when making all those feedback cuts to where your mix just sounds pretty muddy. So let's just see what this camera mic can do. So you saw we had a few of those little cuts up here in the 5K, 8K, 10K we had to cut out for feedback, and then playing some music back, I made a little cut here, notch out around 200 hertz. It was a little muffled sounding down low, actually is a little boomy. So I just made a slight little cut here. And this you just kind of learn over time by ears, is hearing something and then knowing what to cut to get that effect. So you see most of the graph is still flat. There's a tiny little cut there in those feedback frequencies. And we'll just take a listen real quick.
If I could be king, even for...
And the camera mic obviously can't pick up as well as where your ears will. But even with those feedback cuts in there, we got that microphone pretty loud and rocking. There's some high-end cuts, but the system still has some good clarity. You can still hear the shakers and hi-hats in there, and the little acoustic plucking and stuff. So you always want to test to make sure you didn't completely ruin your sound by all of your feedback cuts. So that's pretty much it for the down and dirty system tuning. I will show a quick little method on how to do this for your monitors. It's basically going to be the same thing. So I'm just going to take one of my cabs up here and lay it on its side in front of the microphone and use the same thing, but I'm going to show you just a quick little thing on how you can use these simple little feedback destroyers to kind of automatically did the tuning we did up here on the 31 band. And these things you don't want to use like in a full running situation, like as you're mixing live, because they're kind of slow to catch frequencies. So this is the best way, is actually tuning out your rig like we did up here, making those cuts on the 31 band. But like I said, this has 12 filters in it, and this actually works pretty good for as cheap as I got it. It was worth it. But I eventually will buy another 31 band and hopefully upgrade my rig more once I spend more money on it. But for now, this is what I have. So we'll do a quick little tutorial on how to do that for your monitors. Okay, so this is tuning a monitor rig using the feedback destroyer to kind of just ring out your system. As I said, I wouldn't rely on this to be like an automatic detection feedback like they advertise it, because it doesn't work fast enough to do that. But if you use it to ring out your system prior, it does work as a nice little 12-notch filter. And you saw on your mains, we didn't have to cut very much when we did that. There's just a few little high-end stuff there to feedback. But the monitors are always going to be more of an issue because they're right on top of them. And sometimes you have singers that'll cup the mic, or they'll put their hand up on it. If they get close enough to it with their face, it'll feedback off your face. If they're wearing a hat, that's something I recommend players not do. If you have musicians wearing a ball cap, do not flip it around backwards, take it off, because it'll reflect off the bill of that hat, and you can cause feedback that way. So you can see we just used a little top cab from up here, and I just threw it on its side. So that's a dual 15 and a horn right there for a wedge, which I have done this before, instead of going out and renting wedges, because I currently actually don't own a set. I just rent them whenever I need them. I own 2 sets of tops. I can actually do my sub and top stacked like that, and then I can put these laying down just kind of on the front of the stage, and put one on each side, and it's been loud enough actually to fill the stage for the musicians, so I can get away with that. But if somebody wants more specific personal mixes, then you can rent monitors if you don't have them. So just use what you have. So just to demonstrate how to do this, that's what we're going to do here today. So as you saw before with ringing feedback on the fader, I'm now just doing this on that aux 1 send, so that's that monitor 1 output send. And we are going to just kind of ride that for feedback, and then crank it back a little bit, and you'll see kind of how slow this will catch. This is why you don't want this as automatic, but it works to pre-tune your system. So we just ride it up a little bit till you start to hear something. Slight ring building there. So you see kind of how loud it has to get for those filters to catch. So there's a third, a fourth, and a fifth filter. a real high one building there. Okay, so that locked in 10 filters there. There's still 2 floating. And the way I have it set up right now is these first 9 will completely lock in and stay put, and then these other 3 will kind of float. So if you have some structure changes or mic movement, it kind of picks it. It's supposed to be able to catch it, but 9 is pretty good. And we were able to get, you saw those frequencies kind of build, and it takes a little bit of time for that thing to catch, which is why I always do this pre. And you can see that I can take this all the way almost up to unity on the aux end, and that is in pre-fader, so that's pretty smoking hot basically. We have the same gain settings what we did for the front of house when we did the feedback, because remember, your gain is going to stay the same for the whole channel strip. So you set the gain and leave that pretty much where you're getting good levels here, and then you just adjust your levels accordingly between your fader for your front of house and your aux end for your monitor levels. So see there, that's about almost 11 o'clock on the SIN there. As I said, unity or 0 on an auxiliary SIN pre-fader is quite a bit of level. So we'll give it a quick little test and just see how loud that actually is. Check 1 2. Yeah, 1 2. Check 1 2. So that's pretty powerful, pretty boomy right there. Nice, crisp, clean. Like I said, even cutting out that many filters on your monitor wedges. You want some clarity there, yes, but it doesn't have to sound as crucial as front of house, obviously, because musicians just need to hear themselves, and you get the more me and my monitor musicians that just want it ear bleeding loud. So that's pretty nice and loud there, and it's stable. I couldn't see needing to go much louder than that, especially in this situation. For that type of gig where you're working in small stages like that, that should be blowing everyone away. And remember, as I'm doing that mic check, I'm not going to be singing as loud as what those musicians are when they're really out there, belting out their lyrics, and they got that performance energy behind them. So it'll be louder than that for the performer. So that's a quick little rundown on tuning feedback and tuning PA. And I'll give you my last little final word. Okay guys, so in closing of this Audio 101 3-part series, I want to give you a little bit of brief kind of audio philosophy, as I call it, on some brand choices and things like that. As I said at the beginning of this video, buy a rig that you can afford, that you can build on a budget, and buy the appropriate gear for the level that you are at in your experience, and the quality of the band that you're actually working for and the gigs you're doing. Like I said, you don't have to spend $10,000 building an audio rig. Like I showed in most of mine, I'm using Behringer rack gear, speakers, that I found on a company online. I have a couple of name brand mics. I have some name brand amplifiers. But I got some mix max gear, used a lot of used stuff. You don't have to always buy the most expensive gear. That's the main point I always want to make. You see a lot of stuff on YouTube, people showing some stuff, and everyone's like, oh, Behringer sucks, why would you ever use that? Or this gear is no good, or oh, this is the best, and DBX is better than that. And there's a lot of always the brand bashing kind of back and forth from a lot of people that probably don't know as much as what they're talking about. And quite frankly, in the real world, as the pro industry of $1 million touring acts, and even cheaper than that, like your $60,000 touring acts, most brands that Guitar Center Musician's Friend even sells is not considered pro gear. Contrary to popular belief, just because Guitar Center sells it doesn't mean it's pro gear. DBX, Personas, stuff like that is never used in a pro rig. You will actually see equipment riders. A rider is a document that is part of the legal contract, and the band books a tour or a room. They send out documentation of the gear they are requesting. Most of the riders I have seen, and I have to advance, shows all the time with the tours for famous bands such as Seven Dust and Drowning Pool and some mainstream bands like that. And their rider will actually say no DBX, no PV gear, no QSC, no Personas. The brands that National Acts are using are brands like Midas for analog consoles, Clark Technic EQs, and Compson Gates, and they're getting into mostly digital boards now. Is what people want. And you're looking at like a Yamaha PM5D, which is around $20-something thousand. The board we have at my venue is a Venue SC48. It's about $27,000. Most bands are requesting like the Venue Profile or maybe even a digital Midas board. And those boards you're looking at $60,000 to $100,000 for a console. So they are getting paid to do those shows, and they're getting a lot of money, and that tour is getting a lot of money. So if you're only getting $200 a show, $300 a show, maybe you're working for less than that, you don't have to buy the most expensive gear. If you have a little bit of knowledge, you know how to properly use that gear, you can actually make Behringer gear work. You can make some of the cheaper gear work that you can afford in your budget. So by all means, if you want to buy the more expensive gear, and yes, there is a quality jump, obviously, but remember that that end user that you're basically providing the show for. Is that band going to know the sonic difference between the Behringer EQ and the DBX EQ? Probably not. Is the audience in the bar or restaurant going to be able to tell the difference? Absolutely not. They don't know. They just know gear is gear, and they see a bunch of what they call knobs and buttons, and they ask you, hey, do you know how to work everything on there? Oh, then you can tell them, yes, you do know how to work everything on there, hopefully by the time you watch this video series. So by all means, buy the gear you want to buy, but just buy what you can afford. You don't always have to buy the most expensive name brand gear to get by, and I've shown that countless times, and people, they look at your gear and they're like, oh, you run a Behringer stuff? It's like, yeah, listen to this this next set the band's going to play, this 1 hour set, and they'll be, wow, that was amazing. It's like, see, I told you, you can make semi-decent gear sound good if you know how to properly use it. So with that, I've got one last little thing on my Audio 101 video. I have a general rule of thumb, so to say, on setup. Just a quick little thing, process I do. Maybe this will help you out. You might be going out doing a lot of different gigs, maybe working with different bands. You might work with the same band for a while. Maybe you are the band and you have your own setup, your own equipment, and you're just bringing in a guy to run sound for you. Every venue I go into, if you play the same one a couple of times, you figure it out. But I kind of do a general little process of when you walk in the building. It's always good courtesy, meet the manager or the owner of the room or the restaurant or whatever it is. Meet whoever's actually hiring the band if you're not the band. Let them know, hey, I'm the sound guy. Let them know you're there to give their audience a good time. Just guys that run in and act like they want to own the place, that doesn't go over too well with managers and owners of pubs and bars and restaurants. So shake their hand, meet the manager, let them know, hey, I'm here. What kind of limitations do you have? Where do you want us to set up at? Do you have a decibel limit that you want? And then having those little apps or a decibel meter, you can get a little $100 decibel meter from Radio Shack. Helps out to just go that extra step and have that common professional courtesy. To find out, is there a max level you want? What's a decibel? I get a decibel meter. I'll stay within that range, kind of thing. And then once you figure that out, I always start with blocking first, and that is basically where you're going to set your cabs. Generally, you want to try to get your tops up as high as you can, which is why I stack mine like this, having them up top, because you want that horn to go out over the audience's head. If that's down at body level, you're going to lose all your clarity because you're just shooting that horn right into bodies. And you also don't want that horn right at ear level, because you can cause damage to people's hearing having that high frequency horn just driving right in the inside of the ear. It's annoying. You can cause some damage to the hearing, especially if it's a place that's got tables and they're sitting down. So try to get those up high if you can on the stage, stack them on your subs, Maybe you can stack your stuff in front of the stage, laying horizontal, and then you can set your tops up on the stage. So just try to find your blocking first, where everything's going to go, where your front of house is going to set up. Sometimes you might have to mix from the side of the stage. Sometimes you might actually get out in the audience. So figure out where your gear is going to go. Then figure out where your power is. Figure out how many circuits you have available. Talk to the manager. Do you know where your what circuits we can plug into? Do you know how many amps they are? Like I said, when you're double checking with all your power amplifiers, make sure you know how much current you're going to draw for you. The band themselves might have more, because they got their backline of their guitar amps and stuff like that. So find out where the outlets are, figure out what breakers they are, and if you need to divide up some of your gear. And run some different extension cords. Another quick little thing, try to get those little cheap rugs like bars use, or see if they have any available. You always want to try to cover your cable pass. You don't want to cause a trip hazard. You don't want to be an OSHA violation for the restaurant. So try to cover your cable so you're not tripping their guests and employees. It's just a kind of common courtesy thing. So that's a couple of quick little things I do before I even set up my gear when I arrive at a location. Just a few little tips, to try getting into, when you go into a room like that. Just kind of scan out the room, see how everything's going to go, and then it makes your setup fast. If you use all the other streamlined cabling and stuff I've shown and shown in my other videos, then it'll make your setup go pretty quick. You just drop your gear in its location, is where it's going to go. Do a quick little patch, hook all your cables up. If you got everything labeled, it goes real quick and smooth. Laying out your mics, and then when you're available to start making noise, figure out what that time is. When can we start a sound check? When can we start making noise from the stage? And then you can do that quick little feedback tune, and then have at it. Have a fun show, and then having all your cable streamlined on the setup also helps it on the pack up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Loading out of that bar, your cables will wind up a lot faster, and you'll be able to get your gear out the door. So I hope you learned something from this series. If this is the first video you have watched, watch my other two. There are other part 1, 2, and 3 on this Audio 101 series. Like I said in the beginning, this is just a basic piece-by-piece kind of tutorial. I think overall I've got over an hour and a half worth of video. I could make a whole DVD out of this. So I'm trying to throw out just the most basic knowledge that I have from my experience and working in the pro sound industry and from my degree and stuff like that. And hopefully I cleared up a lot of things for you. Brinster Productions, my brother and I, we have several tutorial videos on YouTube. Check out those other videos. We did one on how to build these subcabs over here, how to do some other cabling. I did some other videos on stuff like that. We're probably going to be doing some more here in the future. Maybe we'll start doing some lighting videos. My brother does lighting, so maybe we'll get into showing some basic stuff on that, on how to do DMX and how to do some scanners or movers or conventionals and hooking up dimmer packs, stuff like that. We might get into that. So hit us up on Facebook, facebook.com/Brinster Productions. We're always answering questions on that, so YouTube takes a little longer for us to get back to if you don't check it. So definitely check us out on Facebook. We have a commercial that we made on there, and if you are in the Kansas City area, hit us up and see if we can come do a gig for you. We try to charge a decent price, anywhere from $200 to $500 usually, depending on what we do and how much gear we bring and how big of a setup. So that's pretty much it. So good luck, have fun, and hopefully you learned something.